my Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1387 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. Season 5 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning podcast from Moneris, hosted by FOTM Al Grego. And Redley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, returning to Toronto Mic'd is Gord Stellick and Damien Cox. Round of applause. Welcome back, guys.
Yeah, studio audience. Thank you. Thank you. Good to be back. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not sure, Damien.
What
good to be back?
The list of the sponsors now.
I know.
Major financial companies. I remember he was, just this little guy running around.
Yeah.
Now he's got this podcast empire. Was Brian Linehan actually here?
No. So he passed because it's a gift from the Watchmen. The Winnipeg band, the Watchmen.
And because they're comparing you to Brian Linehan.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So see, you get it. Okay, so Sammy Cohn, the drummer, he gifted me that. He says that Brian would be proud of me because Brian passed away before Toronto Mic'd existed.
Oh.
So didn't get a chance. But he did his research, and he was always well prepared for his interviews. And I try to do the same thing.
I think very comparable. And by the way, Nelson Millman, our program director, when we almost went under at the Fan in '94 with the baseball strike and the hockey lockout. And and at that point, he said the ad rate was $1 a hauler. So that was it. So that's what you were at one point, and now you've grown into all these great sponsors.
Impressive.
Well, it's thanks to great guests like you guys, and this is actually the second time you guys have come on together, and I loved the first time. So no pressure, but I'm hoping for another.
How many
winner.
times have you come on without me?
I've been on, I think, twice without you. We're kind of like Simon and Garfunkel, that way, and here we're just plugging a book. We really have no interest
They're both
in you.
still alive, right? Paul
Seeing
Simon
each other.
and Simon
Yes,
Garfunkel.
they are.
They're both
still
still alive.
Yeah.
It's a good game, though. Alive, dead,
Okay,
dead
give
or
me
not
another one.
dead.
I'm good at this.
Dead or not dead.
Well, maybe
And
on that segue, so I should shout out Ridley Funeral Home. I'm going to play a song. I want to ask you about somebody, and we'll see if you have any thoughts on this.
Boy.
Gord, alive or
That's
dead?
John Lennon.
Well, I remember it was the Garden's Christmas party, and we heard in that Monday Night Football announced about John Lennon. That's the all-time story that a guy from ABC was in the hospital when John Lennon was brought in and phoned, and Howard Cosell broke the news. Yeah. And I remember waking up the next morning, and they were playing that song, Good Morning America, as they showed the Dakota, where everyone was hanging out there. It was incredibly moving. Yeah.
So that was 43 years ago today.
Holy smokes.
Wow. Way to start
That
an
means
upbeat.
I think I was only 4 then. Jeez.
That's impossible.
Surprised my parents let me stay up that late.
But Damien, do you remember hearing the news?
No, I remember watching. I was like everybody else watching Monday Night Football. But to me, the Beatles weren't that big to me at that time. So I would have been. What year is that?
1980.
1980. Yeah, I mean.
Well, they weren't as big to each other either. They were.
No, but they would have
split.
been bigger to you because you're a wee bit older than I am.
No, I guess that's fair.
And to me, they're my sister and my older sister, my older brother. They were their band, and for me, they weren't quite the same thing. And Paul McCartney, because of Paul McCartney and Wings and all that sort of stuff, was kind of more at the forefront of my music. I was an AM listening guy, right? And John Lennon wasn't as prominent to me at that time. And even now, out of all the Beatles, name the Beatles. Let me take over your show for a minute. Name your Beatles in order of how much you like them.
John Paul. I like John.
There's no John Paul in the band.
I think iconic. I think John Lennon.
Really?
Yeah,
number one.
I do. You really look at it. He was the soul of that group, and I love Paul McCartney, what he is now. I really do. Going out and doing it. And then George was underrated, and Ringo was overrated. How about that?
Jeez,
what about your order?
Vicious.
What about your order?
I would say Paul number one, and I always was a little Paul number one because I know that that George and John were supposed to be the geniuses. But watching that show, what was the show that was on?
Get Back.
Yes, watching that, it became clear to me that Paul was the driving talent of that band, and the other stuff to me fit in around him, and he was and is an amazing talent. And George was the guy for me who was least accessible.
Yeah.
So I would put Ringo in terms of who I like. I just thought, and Ringo is still a very nice and positive presence on the music scene.
I was kidding about overrated.
No, you weren't.
This thing also,
there's a vicious side to Gord Stellick that you may not know that I know. And you just saw a glimpse of it.
I named a goldfish Ringo way back when, so that's the ultimate tribute when you're a kid. After this is when the concerts were at Maple Leaf Gardens. Heightened security started. About the stars were paranoid because of this. Before that, and all of a sudden, little things like when they did their sound checks and that, there was, I wouldn't say the overwhelming security, but there was more of awareness, and some got paranoid if anybody was around, and understandably so.
The Gardens was never really known for security, was it?
Nowhere was there. You could talk your way in anywhere. Really, in all seriousness, you could talk. There was no such, you'd go to a building, you go like the Rogers building, you go right up to the 10th floor or whatever floor. You wouldn't have to check in anywhere.
You two just wrote a book together, and what's that experience like?
Again.
Yeah, again.
Yeah, our second.
Again.
So,
of our trilogy.
So the current book, which we're going to talk about now, Revival, the Chaotic, Colorful Journal. Sorry, I'm starting that again. Revival, the Chaotic, Colorful Journey of the 1977-78 Toronto Maple Leafs.
It sounds better if you say it in the original Czech. Gord, do you want to do it for him? No, yes, that's the name of it. We fought.
Rolls off the tongue.
We didn't fight over the title. Did you like Revival?
Well, I liked Revival. I kind of left it to you and our not unsung, Karen Milner, who is front and center why this is all done. I mean, she gets it done, and her partner, as far as Rob Dawson getting it printed and published and everything else. So she's always coming up with great ideas and very efficient, very specific, where I'm not quite so. And I kind of go, I don't care. Everything's fine. I did like it.
Well, Revival is like a Revolver. It's a Beatles tribute.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to dive into the book. I have a bunch of questions for you about the book, of course, but I do need to ask you about the current hype in the city. You guys have been covering, sports in this city for a long time. And here we are, and what is it? I'm going to timestamp this. It's like 12:21 p.m. on December 8th, 2023. Shohei Ohtani hype is like off the charts right now. Michael wrote in when he heard you were coming on, and he says, Shohei or no way. What do you guys think about, A, the fact, like, will he sign here, but B, like, this hype machine, is it over the top? It's Kawhi-esque in the coverage.
Okay, I'll go first this time.
Why don't you go first?
Just in...
I always defer to
So it might be announced by the time we finish our podcast. That's the understanding. So you've timestamped it. I think it's been sold that Blue Jay fans will be bitterly disappointed now, which is strange to say that. I mean, the expectation. I remember when Roger Clemens came, and that gobsmacked me. I remember that. Wow, there he is. All of a sudden, there was a press conference, and all the Boston writers were just crucifying him. Remember that? Kicking off. They were so pissed that he left. So yeah, I mean, I never. If you asked me 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't think Toronto would have been on his short list. But I think right now, I don't know, Damien, the sentiment is now, hearing every day about it, that the expectation, it'll be a big disappointment if he doesn't come.
I think that's right. And Roger Clemens didn't make the difference in terms of bringing people out to
No.
to what I think this guy might make some difference, but attendance was really good.
Yeah.
The last couple of years. So I don't know how many more people you're going to squeeze in the park.
Renovate it. See, when you do renovations,
I
you
see.
cannot put a bad team out
and
there.
they've hiked
Hiked the prices. Yeah.
prices. So they need to bring in something. So and how healthy is this guy? I mean,
Well, he's not going
He's
to
not
pitch,
pitching next
Yeah.
season.
but
So-
he's a great hitter.
but he can hit.
Yes.
So
So he'll,
We used to get better insight when we're on the air for 3 hours. That Shohei Ohtani, he can hit. And then we'll go to commercial.
I think I've become a bit cynical about these things.
You cynical? Wow. Pray tell.
And I shouldn't be, right? Because Kawhi did turn out to be Kawhi. But whether it was Roger Clemens or John Tavares or give me another name of some big stars.
Hedo Turkoglu.
Yeah, that was poorly pronounced. The big stars come to town. A better one was Hakeem Olajuwon.
Right.
Come
Right.
to town, and they are generally somewhat disappointing because A, they can't meet the hype, who can, and B, they're paid so much money, generally, as this guy will be. He's going to be paid like John Rahm money, that they can't possibly meet the financial expectations. But do I hope they get him? Sure, I hope they get him. I hope they get somebody who can knock in a few runs and maybe not get picked off second base in a playoff game.
Well, and always the free agents are a spice. Your foundation is what wins it. So when they got Winfield and Molitor and Dave Stewart and Jack Morris, who all didn't coincide at the same time, they already had that great team together that won 2 World Series.
Right.
So, it's he's not going to do it alone.
Well, and it is he. My question would, let's say they do sign him. Does that mean that other people have to go to compensate for that? Rogers has more money than Gord, and
Gord without an R.
and should be able to bring this in. And there's probably financial reasons for them to do that.
And there's no cap.
And
It's
there's
the one
no
sport.
cap. Well, I mean, there's a luxury tax, but there's no cap.
Yeah.
So if anybody can do it, they can do it. They really, in theory, have the largest market of all Major League Baseball teams because they have the entire country. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know. Right now, do you think they sign him? Right this second.
Right this second, I still think I still find it hard to believe about coming to Toronto.
Right.
We've been jilted so many times.
Well, and also, why here instead of all these other markets?
Yeah, so I would love it if he could. My guess still is he isn't. Okay, and I don't have any inside knowledge, but the insiders say, or a few of them do, say Toronto has the lead.
Well, everybody's hedging their bet like crazy.
Oh gosh, nowadays, some of the great inside stuff. Well, Damien Cox, they're looking hard to trade for Damien Cox, but they might not trade for Damien Cox.
My favorite one these days is, and you hear it all the time. They're looking to make a trade, but they're not going to make a bad trade.
Yes.
just to make a trade.
God.
What the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
So they're not just going to get killed on this deal. Just you hear that one all the time.
I was reading like an unknown. I don't know who this person is. Like not a recognized
It's
person,
Gord.
but somebody on Twitter is referencing the fact that there's a reservation made by Kikuchi at like a sushi restaurant downtown for 50 people tonight, I think, and this is a sign of a big celebration. So he's coming.
You weren't invited? Gord and I are invited.
So in our neighborhood,
was not
rumors
invited.
were after the Raptors won the championship that Kawhi and his wife were checking out schools. Right, all these rumors. So he's going to come back. They're checking out schools for next year.
Hey,
So
I mean, if you really want to get into the dark side, which I tend to like to, don't you remember the rumors around 9/11 in Toronto that the next planes were coming to Toronto to whatever?
Yes.
And so, we live in a, I think people feel like we live in a disinformation age, but to my mind, we always have. There have always been what probably you can't say anymore are old wives' tales about this or that or whatever, and stories, rumors, and now everybody wants to be on social media saying, "I heard X." That's kind of a pun, actually.
I get it.
I heard this or that, and usually they're wrong.
Speaking of X, which I still call Twitter, there is a note for Damien here. Acadian Scooter writes in, please ask Damien if it is true that he has blocked most people on Twitter, and ask him why he's the most hated man in Toronto sports coverage. I think that's a rude question, and I think Damien Cox is a wonderful
Gord will
guy.
answer it for you. He'll explain it. Gord, you want to take a shot at that?
No, I just no. I think Damien's
You can't
very
believe that.
misunderstood. When I watch old shows like My Three Sons and Family Affair and Leave It to Beaver, when I think of Ward, I think of Damien. Yes. But you do block people. On what's your policy?
You know what?
about blocking?
I don't block anymore. I've done
Mute.
various things, but I mute now because I think mute is highly entertaining because then
They don't know.
they don't know. They think it's still
So
getting
they're just yelling at you.
But Damien, we've talked about this in the past. I
We
think you're-
always
you're-
talk about it,
yeah,
Mike. You're
because,
fixated on
I am,
this.
because I follow you on Twitter, and I think it's wild that you kind of lean in, right? So
not much anymore.
But is that the real Damien that we see on Twitter, or is that just sort of Damien joshing everybody by being a bit of a jerk on?
no, that's me.
Okay, that's the real Damien.
Yeah, that's me. I mean, but I think if you choose to have a straightforward point of view and don't couch it in all sorts of, well, maybe and this, that. Gord and I both know somebody who will remain nameless, who was in the media and used to ask questions, and basically while they were asking the questions, they would give a menu of possible answers to the person to pick from. And if you just say things straightforward, people tend to think,
they think it's curt, like maybe it's a bit.
maybe I should just end everything with a heart.
Or maybe like Ringo, like a bit of a peace and love at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look into that.
I think Ringo's underrated now.
I'll look into that. No, I won't.
Peace and love, peace and love. Okay. So Diamond Dog has a question about wondering if you guys have a lunch bag letdown to open things off with. Do you have a lunch bag letdown?
What would we do if it was today?
Oh no. Well, I don't know about today, but it's funny that of all things has stood the test of time, and I just think we had a rudimentary meeting with Todd Macklin, our producer, at Damien's place in Hamilton.
So here's how it would go, and because often we jump at the same thing, but I'll do one because we would start off with, I would say something like, you watched the Maple Leafs last night and you think, boy, now they've really finally got a goaltender in Joseph Woll. He's making all these saves. He's a draft pick. They've actually developed a goalie of their own. And then, bang, he goes down with an injury that looks kind of significant in a way. And that would be my lunch bag letdown for today. And then Gord would say,
I'd talk about how annoying hard butter is.
yes.
That would be it from being out the previous
Because
night.
it tears the bread,
Yeah.
right?
So, and then best 4 to 7
and then
callers.
best 4 out of 7.
So it was, anyway, it's funny. It stood the
I
test
can't
of time.
believe you two aren't on the air together anymore. And this is just
Well,
beautiful.
we're not done yet.
No, you're not done yet.
That's the book's about us, Revival.
So, okay, so
Hallelujah.
well, listen, if I have my way. Okay, so we're going to get to the book, but let's check in on how you're doing. And like Gord, how are you doing these days? How are you feeling?
How are you doing?
So I got to tell you, we had a curling bonspiel on the weekend called the Chisholm at the cricket club, which I belong.
And who's in it? Just a cricket club?
No, outside clubs and all that stuff.
So what other clubs?
So Leaside and you name it, Donaldo, whoever's curling. But someone over the last 15 years had put a collage of pictures of other Chisholms. So there's a social event, so it's co-ed that way, and it's a men's curling event. So 15 years of pictures, and they were kidding. They're going many pictures of me. They go, oh, there's Gord 10 pounds lighter. Oh, there's Gord 20 pounds lighter. Oh, there's Gord 30 pounds. It was like the weight guessers at the Canadian National Exercise. So I've just endured that all this weekend. So I'm going to get my bleep together there. I'm co-host of the morning show on Sirius XM, Morning Skate with Scott Laughlin and Tyler Mataraz, and Sirius XM channel 91, and it is really, really gaining traction. I really love it. Talk hockey all the time. I'm still part of the fan around their Toronto Maple Leaf coverage in a lesser role, but still do that. And did the book with Damien, and of all things, I'm doing some guest columns in the Toronto Star.
How about that?
So there you go. We are reunited. So
who's writing those for
I'm
you?
keeping.
It's
Do you have one
Damien's
for
the
me today? I got to get one in by the end of the day. So that's what I'm doing. I don't,
And you're doing pretty well. Like the kids are good. And
Oh yeah, kids are good. Daughter Jessie's out working, and son Justin, I gotta watch my beers. it takes them. But anyway, he's at Dalhousie University.
I saw Brother Bob at our he's doing all right.
Oh, we had a really good book launch. Oh, you know, that Uptown pub went out of business 2 weeks later.
No.
Yeah, it's been in business about 10 years or so.
No.
Yeah.
We drove them out of business?
We drove them out of business. We had
no.
Wow.
It's a great local pub, and it'll come. But
Well,
anyway,
it was.
it was.
Until we
But anyway,
wrecked it.
Brother Bob was there, and my brother Bob and that. So it was good catching up with people.
I should have Bob on Toronto Mike, right? He's never been on.
Yeah,
No,
Bob would be really good.
You don't have enough tape.
You talk about a guy who has an opinion.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm gonna reach out, Bob,
If
if
you
you're
ask
listening.
if you like, I remember Mary Ormsby saying that once, that she talked to Bob. You know, just people do just kind of little. She goes, "Holy crap! Did he ever like?" He gives it right to you. Whatever.
Okay,
like
that's fun on a podcast.
When I say no
sometimes.
filter, I mean in a positive way.
And your sister was there?
Yeah,
And came up to me or I think you said or something. That's my sister, and I thought I hadn't seen her since the last book launch, which was 2004.
I know,
and
19 years ago.
You're giving me watch this. You're giving me shit. You can say that on this show.
I understand that.
You're giving me shit for that I didn't recognize your lovely sister.
Even Steve Paikin dropped an F-bomb on this show. He said it's the first time he's sworn on a microphone. So
Steve Paikin grew up just around the corner from me in Hamilton, and we used to play touch football out in the park. Him and his brother Jeff and a few other friends.
Jesse, our daughter Jessie, babysat. Recent babysitter, and condolences. His mom passed away.
Marnie?
And
Lovely lady. Marnie
yes.
was a lovely lady.
So and Steve's.
she passed away in Grey Cup Sunday too.
Did she?
Which Steve felt
Steve
was
just said a
appropriate.
great long life. I guess you had exchanges with him, but he's and I'm glad TVO's back. You know, whatever.
Yep.
Like people
He's
kind of
been a fixture there for a long time.
like can say a lot of people don't care. You know, which is fair, but just in our business, being in it, I feel for those people that thought, are we done for good? So I'm glad they're back.
No, absolutely. And the agenda will be back in 2024. I hear they had some people took the buyouts. They had one of the deals when they struck the deal is they offered like voluntary buyouts, and so many people took it that they need to like.
Oh,
if you guys are looking for work, they
on
might,
their agenda is
the agenda needs. They need to restock the agenda, but in 2024. The agenda with Steve Paikin will return. All right, now how are you doing, Damien? By the way, Gord, you look great. I always want you to know. I think you look great.
Well, thank you.
You look great too.
And by the way,
Thank
there's the beers. You mentioned beers for who are the beers for? Your boy,
Justin.
Justin.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will send you home with some Great Lakes beer for you. You can pass it on, or you could keep it yourself. But delicious fresh craft beer going home with you today.
Nice.
I'll have to pass mine on because I am as of January 1st, 2023, a non-drinker.
Okay.
So that's part of my story.
Well, congratulations.
Is that because you felt like maybe you had a problem, or just decided?
Well, Gord's my problem, but no, it really just started out as a dry month because I didn't want to pack on that 10 pounds I pack on every winter. So I thought I'll just go dry for a month.
You look good too, yeah.
And well, thank you. And just sort of kept going and don't miss it at all. And there's so many good non-alcoholic beers out there now. So I do that.
So okay, maybe not the best Great Lakes Brewery sponsor mention ever,
but I still
talk.
like their beer, and my son loves it. So there you go.
Okay, amazing. And I pointed out I do like the beard on you, and we'll take a photo after this episode, and people can see the beard there. But how are you doing, Damien Cox?
I'm great. I'm thrilled and happy. Took the family, all of them, on a big trip to Europe in the summer.
Wow.
Played a ton of golf. Got my cap down. Gord and I played once together this summer. And the kids are all doing great. And my youngest is now doing engineering out at Dalhousie, which who's out there?
Justin.
Oh yeah, Justin's
Our son
out
Justin.
there,
right?
Yeah. No, I'm happy. I'm not doing a lot of work. That's what's fun to do this book with Gord, and I still do some work for the Star. And actually, probably the thing that I get busy with this time of year is. On Monday, we'll have the big vote for the Northern Star Award, which used to be called the Lou Marsh Award, and is now. And so we're going to be voting on who is Canada's Athlete of the Year for
it's a tough one this year.
2023. So I'd be interested in your guys giving me some input. Let me write it down, though.
Summer McIntosh, right? But there are
She's a
many
tremendous athlete.
many competitors.
Great
for this
swimmer.
one. Yeah. This one. What do you think, Gord?
I'll have to give it some thought.
No, you just have.
You got. Canada is in the Olympics,
There's
the basketball team.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got Shea Gilgeous Alexander.
Absolutely.
You got Nick Taylor, who won the Canadian Open.
That's what I do.
You got Connor McDavid. No, Connor McDavid's an interesting one, right? Yeah. So he was drafted in 2015 15, right? So he's now, is that right? So he's now
Yes.
26 or 27, something like that. He has never won this award. He is the best Canadian hockey player of his generation. He scored 64 goals last year. He won the Hart Trophy, the Art Ross, the Rocket, and the Ted Lindsay. And will he win this year? And it's tough. It is.
No, it's a very deep
very
field.
tough.
Well, 'cause
I think Shea's going to win, actually.
I think the voters feel he's already got so many accolades, fairly or unfairly. I think a lot of the voters, and they always think, give
how many
someone
of
else
the
some
voters
props.
do you know? Name,
I have no
name
idea.
2 voters.
One.
Well, then
you're
why
one.
do you say stuff like
No,
that?
voters in general. I just mean.
What do you mean voters in general?
No,
There's a
say,
finite group
like
of
Connor
voters.
McDavid will have his time, but Summer McIntosh,
Okay.
I want to give some props now because they don't get the same
I get
kind
what
of.
Gord's saying, because with Shea, for
No, you
example, they make big bucks, right? What you're saying is they're compensated financially, right? They get their
Hey,
flowers.
I got
or
news
whatever.
for you.
Yeah.
All athletes are compensated right,
Dave,
financially.
Dave Perkins is a voter, right? Scott Morrison a voter?
No.
Mary?
Although they certainly could be. Mary certainly could be, but not currently, no.
Oh, is this like the Hockey Hall of Fame
no.
voting?
No, it's not like that at all.
Can you name
actually.
all the voters?
I can tell you who they are if you want to know.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, like. Oh, yeah. I have to guess, and you'll tell me yes or no.
Is Brunt?
Stephen Brunt
Yes.
is a voter.
There you go. Finally got one.
Okay, so Stephen Brunt will be at TMLX 14, which is tomorrow, and I already let you guys know. Damon, you're a maybe. Is that right? You're a maybe for
maybe,
TMLX?
but I'm like
You're not showing up to this.
Well, you never know.
I think
it's supposed to be a nice day. I actually thought about riding my bike down today, so if I ride my bike down tomorrow, maybe I'll come by. Where
Okay,
is
so
it?
it's at Palma's Kitchen.
Where's that?
So it's at Palma's Kitchen is near Mavis and Burnham Thorpe. It's in Mississauga. It's I have to get you the address. I'll text you the address.
Are you going?
I can't.
He's got
Why?
some.
We're going to a play.
You lie.
No,
You
Ted Ioanno's
lie.
son's play. It's out in Oakville. He's in one of the art
Man,
school there.
Unbelievable, the stuff you get.
But there's a couple of
In the
Hamiltonians
afternoon.
coming.
In the afternoon, there's
Yeah,
a
in the
play.
afternoon.
What
is the
time's the play?
Like, I think 2 o'clock or something like that. Here, I'll show you the text from Ted. Tickets are $30. I asked him how much we got. Anyway, I'll show you
So
later
it's
on.
noon to 3 p.m. tomorrow. I know Stephen Brunt's going to be there because I confirmed it with his wife when I bumped into her at the Skydigger show in Hamilton a couple of weekends ago.
Love the Sky Diggers.
Me too. I love the Christmas show.
I don't know who the Skydiggers are, but I'm all for them.
I bit on that, Damien. I'm like, yeah, me too, buddy. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, I gotta stop doing that. Okay, Tom Wilson's also making the trip from
Big Tom.
He's like the mayor of Hamilton. So okay. And I will shout out Palma Pasta, and I will let you 2 gentlemen know that there is a large meat lasagna in my freezer for you guys to take home. You guys,
This
you
one
love
seemed
that, right,
light.
Gord? Yeah.
Honest to God,
Is it
it's an
empty?
outstanding lasagna.
Oh, it really
honestly.
is.
Lisa always says that and welcomes that.
Does Lisa
part
say,
of the
hey,
journey.
hey, Gord, why don't you do another episode of Toronto Mic'd?
No, she doesn't say that. It's not a knock against you, but she just, the pasta.
It
That's
doesn't
it.
sound like something she'd say.
See, yeah.
No.
All right. Have you guys seen the series Borje, the Swedish-Canadian collaboration?
So I have not seen it. I got a neat note from Devin Smith with the NHL Players Association. He was over in Sweden for that grand opening when the teams were over there.
Yep.
And he said one of the funniest ones was they did a Q&A after with Margita, Borje's first wife and longest wife, and that, and
Like long, like
one and one.
lengthwise?
No, just time wise,
Like height?
Quite the wingspan.
And when he was in Toronto, Margita was his wife, and so but she said she remembered that I called her because we're setting up that we're going to give Borje a blazer. And she took it to be like a blazer, and she didn't quite understand what was going on. But no, it was the car. We were setting up a surprise thing. And it's the only time we did it. That
See, I
we
would think
flew
it's a jacket, too.
Yeah, I know, but I think I did explain it. She just didn't hear me, but she got a kick out of it. So we flew Borje's parents over. And I stole it from the Philadelphia Flyers, did it for Bill Barber night. So then we had Inga Hammerstrom drive the car on the ice. Paul Morris, the PA guy, he wasn't really playing along. He didn't do stuff like that. He was pretty straight. So
He's still with us, right?
Oh,
Like,
I know.
alive
Paul's
or
great,
dead?
but he wasn't. Yeah, but so people were a little confused. Well, just a car seemed to drive on the ice, right? A random car.
How come it wasn't like a tea service? Isn't that what Harold
But
did
Harold,
to his players?
see, it was a better idea. I came up with the idea what Philadelphia had done when Reggie Leach drove the car out. and Bobby Clark was at center ice because he was the general manager, and they had Bill Barber night, and this worked out well.
Remember when Daryl got his 10-point night, Harold gave him a tea service.
Silver tea service. And Ian Turnbull.
A silver tea service.
Ian Turnbull got one when he got 5 goals. Yeah. And apparently it was expensive. I don't know whose idea it was. And I remember them talking on the plane once, and I think Turnbull put some cleaning solvent on that screwed it up. Like they were talking about something, and
that's a lunch bag letdown.
Yeah.
I have to say, by the way, and we'll get back to Boria, and I haven't seen it either. But if I could urge people to buy this book for one thing, and that will be Gord did an amazing interview, maybe 2. One with Ian Turnbull, which he says some of the best stuff.
Talk about the contrarian.
Oh my goodness. And ends up being a great part of the story. So Ian Turnbull.
Because Boria in some regards inspired this book revival, right?
Yeah,
very much.
Yeah. It was, and by the way, Boria was involved in that series as well, which is great. He was healthy in that series you're just talking about, but
but
the Boria,
there's a
Boria series.
Swedish,
Swedish
I had Jason Priestley on the show, and he played Jerry McNamara in this series, so I kind of got a influencer media link, and I got to watch this thing. And remember all those pictures we saw of like Lanny McDonald and Daryl Sittler and Tiger Williams and Boria, like in front of Maple Leaf Gardens. That was all part of the series. Like that's why it was all done. It's like
So the thing was his incredible, like of all things, the only night of the year they have 2 home games on consecutive nights, because Friday night is a TSN Hockey Hall of Fame weekend. Right. They get that. And then Hockey Night in Canada said, well, we're not going to give up a Saturday. We got all these people in town. We want a home game on Saturday.
Right.
So that's when Boria came. And the Friday was oh my God, you got to be kidding me. And the Saturday we were prepared for it. And and Damien talked about it. It was just like the genuine emotion and the bravery, and the soul it seemed to give everybody, and just seemed to inject the organization. It gave them a soul. It gave them personality. And Damien just said, boy, what an iconic figure, and we should look at doing something.
He's got the story wrong.
We should look at doing something about
not how it
that team.
No.
Yeah, it was.
It was quite the moment, though. That was quite the moment.
I'm going to explain this to you how it happened, because you always get this wrong.
No, I don't.
Gord is spot on with stories that happened in the 1970s. Less good with anything that's happened in the last 7-8 years. So what happened was Gord was there that night, the Friday night and the Saturday night, both nights. But anyways, and then 2 weeks later, Boria died. 2 weeks later, Boria died, and it was a Friday.
Right.
And so I was gonna write something for the Star about Boria Salming. Sadly, I've sort of ended up doing that lately for the Star, because I wrote on Mike Bossy, I wrote on Guy Lafleur. So This is kind of this is my new niche, I guess. Anyways, so I called Gord because I want to get because I knew he knew Boria. This is on the Friday. He calls me back on the Monday, which is not so good for a newspaper deadline.
Why did I not call you on the Friday?
I have no idea why you didn't call me. So he calls me back on the Monday. So the paper's long gone. But anyways, and so we start talking about Boria, and we start talking about the 70s and hockey then, and all the stories, and it just sort of this there's a lot of stuff here, because we really had not talked about doing our first book together. Was a bitter, nasty experience. It was like the Beatles at the end, Gord and Damien playing on top of the rooftop, never seen again. It was like that sort of thing. And then so we had really never thought about it, and then we really decided that day. Yeah. And by the next week, talked to Karen, and then we were off. So that's how it happened.
So, okay, that's correct. Okay, I was sort of, I didn't mean it was that night. So that was correct. And
you worried he's running out of tape? We're running out of time?
And you know what? Maybe why I didn't call you back was, so what happened to me on that Saturday, just so you know, do you go by Toronto or Mike? What's your first name?
You can call me Mike.
Okay, so of all things, by coincidence, I happened to be visiting somebody in one of the boxes. And when I went in the intermission.
This was on the weekend that Boria's last visit to Toronto.
Yeah, so the second night, the Saturday
night,
when
the Hockey Night in Canada, right?
So
that wasn't when I called you.
No. So anyway,
I called you 2 weeks later.
I know, but anyway, so I was actually not during the intermission because I did the intermissions on radio. So I was visiting somebody quickly, Tom Bittle, that's right, I was visiting. So as I was walking down there, there's Tom Ferguson, Ally Afridi, and I go, what are you guys doing here? Because I know the alumni box is elsewhere. And he goes, oh, they got a box for Borja down there. And I looked about 5 boxes down. Like, I think even Larry Tannenbaum was there. So there was a crowd there. So I went in to Tom's, and then I had to go back upstairs. And I've told Damien this story. And then I walked, and there was the door. And I'm so glad I thought, so I opened the door, and it was relatively quiet there in Borja's box. It had been helter-skelter. His son Anders was there. What a fun young man. Teresa, like Anders was more the business guy. Teresa just was crushed, devastated. But Borja and his wife were sitting, if you can follow, like the third and last rows, just off to themselves, watching the game. So I thought, okay, I just leaned in, and I go, Borja, Gord Stellick. Like I didn't know how it was going to go, and he first gave a look unfortunately because of the ALS, it's hard to read the look. Then he grabbed my hand, and we had to shake, and then I hugged him for about 3 minutes. And he was so strong. He was so strong. Like he was so ravaged by the disease, but he was so strong. And he's trying to talk, and and it was one of the most tragic, wonderful moments of my life. Okay, wow. And I did it on a whim because Borja and we had a real solid relationship in that, and I was reluctant to talk about that story then because everyone was talking about being his best friend. You know what I'm saying? So I think that was part I didn't want to, because it was like a very fortunate, special moment for me, and a moment I never envisioned. I mean, Borja, the iconic Borja, the specimen, the best physical specimen I've ever known in my whole life. So so that was a little bit. I kind of laid off because it's a story about me, and at that time, there's others that could have talked. Wow. How's that, Damien?
No, that's one of your more elaborate excuses.
It is. No, it's not. It honestly
but the
was.
The point is, we did ultimately 2 weeks later. He managed to pull himself together to call me back 2 weeks later.
Together.
Gord and I have known each other since June of 1989 when we were flying together to go to the Memorial Cup, and I would say the one thing we can count on, we still make each other laugh.
That's right.
But we came with a book, and it wasn't just going to be about Borja because there were all these other stories. We quickly thought, oh, there's that story and that story. Has anybody ever written a book on this? Is there something out there? And but it was certainly inspired by Borja.
Yeah. Okay, so to get us to 1977-78, that season, Chris Ward writes in, was the 77-78 season Borja's best chance at displacing Orr, Potvin, and Robinson for the Norris Trophy? The three of them were the only D to win it for about 15 seasons.
So Ian,
I don't think so.
No, Ian Turnbull talks about Roger Nielsen wrecked it for everybody. So Ian Turnbull would say no, that Roger, Ian had his best season before Roger came, and Roger sucked as far as Ian goes. So,
and the best part, if I can just interrupt, Ian loves to tell the story about how he was in junior hockey and he had a chance to play for Roger Nielsen, and he didn't want to play for Roger Nielsen in junior hockey. He definitely didn't want to play for him in the NHL.
No. So there was an element that it was the team concept. Like the year before under Red Kelly, like Borja and Ian Turnbull had ridiculous stats, offensive stats. So it's, he came second once because he was only a first team All-Star once, Borja. He was the only Leaf to be an official first team All-Star from when they won the Stanley Cup in 1967 till Matthews and Marner have done it. That's a long.
And I would say it was his misfortune to come along at that time, because I'm not sure, maybe you would disagree because you were closer to him, but he wasn't better than Orr. He wasn't better than Robinson. He wasn't better than Potvin, although Potvin was still developing at that point. Brad Park, maybe he was, he would have been to me. Does that sound right?
Yeah, well, nobody's Bobby Orr. Bobby Orr's in a whole different class as far as I'm concerned. And the other ones are all different. And the other ones, unfortunately, got more winning experience and more playoff experience. Teams. But they all, they were all great. They were all great.
Yeah. Quick little update. We're going to get back to it's that I just thought I'd keep an eye on this Ohtani watch just in case it happens during our
What's the scoop?
Our chat here. But they're tracking a flight that apparently I know that these flight trackers. There's apparently a flight. Don't have time to dig in and how reliable, but from Santa Ana to Toronto that's in the air right now, and it's estimated to arrive at, let's see now, it won't be here till 6, what is that possible? Anyway, bottom line is, apparently there's a flight in the air right now, and they're speculating that Ohtani is on this flight.
Do you know what day he signed with the, what's today, the 7th? Today's the
this is the 8th. This is the anniversary of the John Lennon assassination.
And this is the date on which he signed with the Angels. December 8th.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
is this the same plane that brought Kawhi over?
Same one.
Okay.
This is the same plane that brought Kawhi over. So
I hope for Toronto fans,
I'm sorry
it's true.
to bring us back to Revival, but if I get any more news during this conversation, I'll maybe chime in with it here. But take me back to 1978, 77, 78. Like Harold Ballard's in charge, right? But he's also in jail. Is that right?
No, he's out of jail by then.
So he's out of jail by then.
He's out of the slammer.
Okay.
Yeah, so 77, 78. He took over the team in, say, I think 1972-ish. And then he took it over and promptly went to jail and then came out.
And while he was in jail, that's when Salming and Hammerstrom were signed.
Yeah. So Jimmy Gregory was kind of allowed to do his own thing, and he's the most underrated general manager of all time, in my opinion. But anyway, wonderful man. And that year, Harold Ballard's the owner. And 77, 78, they all say, like Daryl Sittler said, he actually left him alone. He was having fun. He thought it was great. But
he didn't do anything crazy that year.
But the next year...
Well, the only thing he did, I think it was that year. Was that year with the names on the back of the jersey?
No, that was later on.
That was later. You're right.
So anyway, he had a fun. He thought it was great. But the next year, when they didn't grow, he all of a sudden got impatient and already was talking about getting rid of Roger and Jimmy, and that's what happened. So they look at it as a real charmed year, that it was just Roger Nielsen's first year in the NHL, very innovative, real successful year on the ice, although... we document that they didn't kick ass on the ice. They didn't squeak in the playoffs, but they weren't dominant in the regular season. But then a real dominant playoff win over Los Angeles. And then the Leafs were the Broad Street Bullies. They got beat by the Broad Street Bullies from so many times. They were the ones that bullied the New York Islanders and pulled a huge upset.
Right.
And we talked to Chico Resch and Brian Trottier about it, and they just said this was a big building block for them to 2 years later start to win 4 consecutive Stanley Cups.
Yeah, it was funny because Roger Nielsen is remembered as a very cerebral hockey coach. He liked his goon hockey. He really did. And at least in this particular case, he identified that's what had to be done. That's what would win in the NHL. And it did and it didn't. I mean, the Leafs, and we talk about the book being Revival. This was a chance after they'd won the Cup in 67. They'd gone down. They'd started, they'd had some moments in the early 70s, but not really. They were struggling. They got beat by the Flyers 3 years in a row. And all of a sudden, boom, there was excitement and people were pumped about hockey in Toronto again.
Well, in the book, you referred to it as the era of Slapshot. So that was sort of the...
that was the year Slapshot came out.
Right, 1978. All right, go back to Harold Ballard for a minute, because I'm mildly obsessed with the Ballard stories. But there was an anecdote in this book from Selwood. It was about one Christmas. Harold, I guess he would dress up as Santa Claus for the parties, and then you'd get presents. But then 2 weeks later, he said he noticed that the cost of the gift had been deducted from his check. So it sounded like Harold Ballard was basically charging the cost of the Christmas gift that he would give them as Santa Claus to the player.
So it was interesting from Brad Selwood talking about guys that went to the WHA, Jim Dory, Ricky Lee, him, like 3 great young defensemen that should have been there. All I can say is when I was there, Harold did not play Santa Claus. Somebody else did. And he was very generous with his gift. It was 2 American Airlines tickets wherever you wanted to fly.
Okay.
So I'm not going to take issue with Brad Selwood's memory, but,
But
yeah,
they were a very cheap organization, to the point, because you explained to me the story about the per diems.
Oh, so, and a few teams were like this. So Brian...
it was such a different era in the NHL.
Well, Brian Sutter said when Harry Arness brought the St. Louis Blues in 1983, they had 4 games in Chicago, and they stayed at a different hotel each time because each one gave a free introductory offer. So they stayed. So to Damien's point about the per diem was, say per diem was $30 a day. So if you left after 3 p.m., it was half days per diem, 15. But if you left at 7:30 p.m. after that, you paid no per diem. So the Leaf charter would leave at 7:35 p.m. Get in like 9:30, go to bed 11:30, save $15 a person. And that wasn't uncommon. And then of course a lot were commercial flights back then as well.
And the players paid their own parking.
Yeah,
around the thing. So they were, the guys say they were. Guys like Mike Pellick, that they were a very cheap organization, and they lost a lot of talent because they were cheap. Now, Gord knew Harold personally and saw him also do some very generous things.
Yeah, well, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so tell me a little more about, because I'm this era here, 1977, 78. The WHA, like, just help us out with what role that plays with the league at that time. The WHA.
Well, it's on its way out.
In 77, 78.
Whereas early, the Leafs got decimated because, to Damien's point, they were one of the teams. Now, Clarence Campbell, the NHL president, said, this league's not going to last. And Harold really revered Clarence Campbell. Maybe he just revered Clarence Campbell, saying, don't spend money.
Right.
But, they lost Bernie Perrant, Jim Harrison, all those defensemen and they got killed by the WHA. So it was a huge factor in their demise. But it was becoming irrelevant right around 77, 78.
But before that, I would say what you're seeing right now between the PGA Tour and Live Golf really mirrors what was going on back then between the NHL and the WHA. And in fact, in the book, it talks about when Bobby Hull signed, that made a lot of guys more confident to sign with the new league. And I think that's what you're going to see with John Rahm now, him signing, that you're going to see more guys jump. And the money was crazy and everybody was saying they can't possibly pay it. And in the case of the WHA, they couldn't. Yeah. They didn't have the money. But it also opened, the NHL was not paying players anywhere what they were due at that time because they had total control, a total monopoly, and they had also a reserve clause that allowed them to send the players wherever they wanted to go and at any time. So the WHA changed all that. And for a lot of guys, they'll say to this day that, they all owed Bobby Hull a huge debt of gratitude because he changed the way in which the financial structure of the league. Now, for the Leafs, Harold Ballard looked at it and said, I'm not paying. The league's not, and I'm not paying. And probably encouraged by other owners to do that. Meanwhile, these other teams kept their players. The New York Rangers kept their entire top line, but the Leafs lost a lot of good young players who hadn't yet established themselves.
Yeah.
And maybe they weren't going to be stars in the NHL, but they cost the Leafs a lot of depth. And then eventually they also lost guys like Keon and Ullman, who maybe were at the end of their careers.
Paul Henderson.
But still had value as players. And the Leafs just threw a lot of these guys away. And the worst one of all was Bernie Perrant, how they lost Bernie Perrant. And then when he did come back to the NHL, they traded him to Philadelphia. And immediately the Flyers won the Cup and he was the Conn Smythe Trophy. And that has to be greatest loss of any single player in Maple Leaf history.
Really?
Well, a goaltender in his prime. Yeah, a goaltender in his prime, like that.
But you could say Tuukka Rask. There's so many examples.
But not.
Bernie Perrant.
Bernie Perrant. This was in a how many 16-team league at that time.
Yeah.
And he became the best goalie. Him and Ken Dryden and were the best two goalies, and they had him. And they didn't have to give him up.
No, just exactly. Jim Gregory said that Gil Stein was with the Philadelphia Flyers. He was their legal counsel, later became president. And he cornered Harold at a governor's meeting and just said, hey, what are you doing? The guy's not going to play for you. You might as well get something. Where Jimmy Gregory was just saying, hey, he's going to want to come back. We got to keep him. So Harold got pissed off. And so they got a first-round pick and Doug Favell in return.
But think about this. And the first-round pick, that was the one that turned into
Bob Neely. It turned to Bob Neely, Ian Turnbull was Boston.
The wild part about the Bernie Perrant going to the WHA, so the Leafs play on the Saturday. He hops on a flight the next day, goes down to Miami, signs with the Miami Screaming Eagles, and then comes back and continues to play for the Leafs.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that happening today?
I know.
Wow.
But that's the way things were back then.
That's the way things work around here. Speaking of that, Dave Hodge was asked a question. He was here last week to kick out his 100
How many
songs.
times has he been here now?
7 years in a row we've done the
Wow.
100
I never got
songs of the
asked
year.
to kick out the jams again. Jeez.
It's different kind of jam kicking. It's 100 of the year. Have you listened to 100 new songs in 2023?
For sure.
He does 100 new songs?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's the thing. But the thing is, he doesn't duplicate artists. So that's where it blows my
Wow.
mind.
Oh, yeah, he
because,
knows his stuff. He knows his
So that's 100 unique artists with new
Yep.
music that he seeks out and he loves and he shares with everybody. So he was asked, like, what was the greatest team in the 70s that never won the cup? And I think the person asking the question might have been fishing for the Maple Leafs. But I'm curious what your answer to that question is. The best team of the 70s, or at any point in the 70s, that never won the cup in the 70s.
I think the Chicago Blackhawks should have beat Montreal that time. You know,
There you go.
is that what he said?
He actually didn't answer. He just
Too big on the tunes?
he was no. I think he had to process it a little bit.
I mean,
there.
you can make a case for the New York Rangers with Jean Rattel and,
They'd be the two.
Rod Gilbert and Vic Hadfield and Brad Park and the two goalies when they had Jacquemin and Gilles Villeneuve.
Yeah.
Or Villemure, right? And a few other guys. But, and that's the trick with the Leafs of 77, 78. Were they good enough to win the cup? No. But look at what the Islanders did after they lost to the Leafs, and then look what the Leafs did. And I think there was a foundation there that had they had the structure and the organization to build on that foundation, they might have been
the Islanders.
They might, or at least might have been in a position to really challenge for the cup a couple of years after that. But they chose some other directions.
Okay, go. So before we get to sort of like how it all went wrong so shortly thereafter, I want to ask you about the Toronto Toros. So do they play a role at all in all this? Like the Toros? I just yeah. So tell me about that.
Well, I mean, they play
franchise.
a role, and again, Gord would have lived this. They play a role in that they moved from Ottawa to Toronto, and Johnny Bassett, who's the son of Ballard's former partner with the Leafs, brings the Toros to Toronto, and they're going to challenge the Leafs. And they're going to play out of Varsity Arena, except they can't play out of Varsity Arena because U of T has first dibs on best dates, and there's no lighting there for television and stuff. So ultimately, a whole bunch of stuff happened, and they end up going to the Gardens. So at the same time, he's losing players to the WHA. Ballard's making money off the Toronto Toros being in town. And they really tried first to be an alternative to the Leafs, but then gradually they kind of became the Leafs. They brought in players like Henderson, to play for them. Frank Mahovlich. They brought in Bobby Bond to coach, which was a complete disaster, I guess, did not work out at all. And ultimately, they kind of became a bit dysfunctional, like the Leafs. And mostly they just spent way too much money and ultimately had to move to Birmingham. But, I mean, do you remember them ever thinking, Gord, that they were ever going to really challenge the Leafs in the market?
There was, of all things, just like the Toronto Argonauts had their worst playoff game, worst with the biggest attendance.
Were you there?
No. But they had...
Were you there, Damien?
Which one?
Oh, the egg laid by the Argos in the Eastern
playoff game.
Yes, I was there.
Oh, so they had a series, I think, against the San Diego Mariners, and it got national TV somehow.
Andre Lacroix and those guys. Yeah.
And they got blown out. And I'm not saying it would have happened, but that was just kind of wasn't able to seize the moment. They played a lot of Friday nights. They'd be about half full. Harold really liked Johnny Bassett. His dad was an arch enemy, but he respected Johnny Bassett with what he did and I guess it gave him a little bit more revenue with the WHA folding and also incurring revenue from the WHA and all the concerts and that. It seemed like 1980 started to flip a bit, that rather than being cheap, he was just more frugal. Harold. Because he was overextended for the first 8 years. About it. So they're really watching their pennies then.
I would have think too. I mean, Johnny Bassett, he was a rebel in his own way, and in fact, tried to bring a USFL team to Toronto, and the government I mean, imagine that.
Unbelievable.
Now the government's turned them around and said, no, you can't.
Mark Lalonde was the minister,
Yeah, and so...
To protect the CFL.
So he moved the team to Memphis. They became the Memphis Southmen. So he was a bit of a kind of a rebel, and I think maybe Harold would have respected that.
I think so. Yeah, he would like that.
Absolutely. Now, before we get to, I'm going to ask you about some specific key parts of this 1977-78 team. The book is called Revival. Do you guys care how somebody buys the book? Just go to like Amazon, or do you have a
just
preference?
go to Gord's house. He's got like a...
Like, how do you get a signed... What if you wanted Revival signed by Gord Stellick and Damien Cox?
Come to Mike's house then.
Yeah, we'll come now.
We'll leave one for you.
Well, I know Gord's got a bag of books here, yeah.
I think if someone ever really wanted to have a book signed, that we would figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
We would.
How about
do
that?
But you should
It's actually an honor. It's an honor.
Gord's signature increases the value of the book. My signature decreases the value of
Negates
the book.
that increase.
But yours is way more legible than my signature.
But Damien, I'm curious, since you were at that game at BMO Field, the Argonaut game, because so I have to admit I don't tune into as many Argo games as I probably should. But I
thought you were a big Argo fan.
I'm a big fan of the Argos when they're in the Eastern Final and then in the Grey Cup, and along the way I pop in and out. But I was well aware that this was the greatest Argos team of all time, one of the greatest CFL teams of all time, and I was quite excited to watch them in the Grey Cup. And then my kid had a hockey practice, and I get home and I tune in for the second half of that Eastern Final, and they actually just looked horrible. And I was thinking, like, okay, they have this perfect storm where they finally looked like they filled BMO. It looked full to me, 25,000 or something. They've never had that many people at BMO Field for an Argos game. And then that happened. Like, it just seemed like the worst luck. But what was it like being there? Like, was it as bad in person as it looked on my television?
Well, I mean, growing up in Hamilton, it's never bad when you see the Argos go down the tube. So I wasn't in tears in the press box, certainly watching it. But I think it was a really unusual case of a star player in the Canadian Football League, in this case, the quarterback of the Toronto Argonauts, Chad Kelly, completely, I mean, he just looked like he was paralyzed. He couldn't, after having this great season, and they were 16-2, and he'd done all this stuff, and it was stage fright. And all of a sudden, he started just doing incredible things. I mean, the Montreal defense scored, could have outscored the Argo offense that day.
Kind of like Manoah pitching in the playoffs. Seriously.
Yeah.
Really?
It was really something to watch. It was kind of good to see Montreal in a way, but I don't know. Like, to me, I never really took seriously that people were saying this is the greatest Argo team ever. And that's usually by people who've been watching for about 6 years. I mean, if you saw those Doug Flutie teams or the Matt Donegan teams, or I'm trying to think of even, the Grey Cup team in the early 70s and the talent.
Everybody does instant takes now. Everyone instant takes.
Well, and often they don't go back very far. So, had they beat Montreal and then won the Grey Cup decisively, then you could make the argument, but you got to win something. And right now, this was a season which the Canadian Football League, to my mind, was really weak. There were a lot of weak teams. So the fact that they were 16-2, congratulations to them. Ryan Didwitty did a good job. It was a solid team, but obviously in the end, not nearly close to being the best Argo team ever.
No. In your opinion, which is the best Argo team ever? Is it one of those Flutie teams?
I think those Flutie teams. I think you could make a case, even though he was here for such a short period of time, that you could make a case that he might have been the greatest CFL player ever. And that's, and I'm talking, obviously you got Warren Moon, then you go way back to Sam Echeverry and stuff. But Doug Flutie was in a universe of his own for the years, and he was so exciting. And it was at a time where he had great talent around him too that he could use. And I don't know.
He was at Pinball Clemens was the Easter Seals Ambassador Award a year or two ago, and Doug Flutie made a point that he wanted to be there, and he came, and he just talked about pinball, and it was really neat, his remembrances of pinball and his time with the Argos. And he just said, he goes, I was with the Calgary Stampeders, and I forget the coach's name, but he goes, he's the most buttoned-down guy, and we'd be watching the Argos, and they're going, and he goes, and they're going, what the hell is that? He goes, then all of a sudden the next year, and the guy's looking at him. John Huffnagel was the Calgary guy, but he just, about pinballs.
He played for Matthews here in Toronto, didn't he? Don Matthews, who was kind of a groovy rock and roll.
Yeah. So they were kind of the old Oakland A's or the fun team or the New York Mets or whatever, the 80s and that. The Argos were that in the 90s.
All right. You mentioned Roger Nielsen earlier in this chat, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little on his contribution to the 77-78 Toronto Maple Leafs.
Phenomenal.
Were you friends with him, would you say?
Oh, big friends. Huge friends. I worked with him in Toronto, then again in New York.
Oh,
I
that's
just,
right.
I just, when I say I loved Roger, I just did. He's in this button-down corporate world of sameness and sound bites and that, Roger was always unique. Daryl Sittler just talks about as a guy that Roger was light years ahead of everybody. Captain Video. He's the first guy to do video. He did it himself that year. He did it himself. He put together, he spliced the tape, he did a report, he did all. He talks about, that they would get a videotape of the game. Some places, the game wasn't on TV, so he'd have to get and they'd probably get like a sort of a film student from a college to do a game, almost like a Zapruder film.
I mean, I used to co-host a podcast of Mark Hebshire, and he would talk about there were games weren't being telecast, and they wanted the footage for Sportsline, and they would pay some local guy to record it.
So say St. Louis, a game in St. Louis wasn't being on TV, so St. Louis Blues would get someone for him. The Leafs would pay. And Roger said once he was trying to set it up with the person and the anthem started and he couldn't make it down to the bench. He's literally with a minute before.
Right.
But Randy Carlyle, was part of that team too. And he talked about the all-time clip. He said when they're in the Central League the year before with Dallas, and Roger has to splice the tape together. And he's showing Barclay Plager, God rest his soul, the tough Plager brothers.
With the Brill cream.
Yeah, he got sent down to the Kansas City Blues. He's 36 years old. And he's no helmet, and he's got Brill cream in his hair, and he goes down to block a slap shot. And Roger showed that about commitment. He said that's the ultimate commitment. And Randy Carla says, I still think of that almost every day, all these years later, but about how the tools of video and how they're used by everybody now. So Roger was way ahead of his time, and that was a big part of the success that year.
And this is a good time to say, if you buy this book, Revival, you will get that Gord Stellick story and more.
Yes.
This book is chock full of Gord Stellick.
Yes.
Oh yeah, we're just like tip of the iceberg here today.
And a free tube of Brill cream.
Yep. I don't use it as much anymore.
You could put it in the beard, I think. Mike Palmatier.
Creepy.
Talk to me about Mike Palmatier back in 77-78.
So everyone loves Mike Palmatier. So it's this funny thing that he's this incredible, popular goaltender. Yeah. And then he goes to Florida, retires, then comes back, and he becomes a really great hockey scout. And he wants to keep a low profile. He just wants to keep a low profile. So when I talked to him, because, I have a good relationship with him, and he it wasn't that he was leery, but and then he said to me, even at the end, he goes, I'm kind of off the grid, and I like it that way, which is strange for such a hugely, wildly popular goaltender. And his goaltending was a big part of their success that year and in the playoffs. So probably, Damien, what a 3-year period, 3 years, just meteoric rise and sensational goaltending. And so he was just a neat personality, undersized goalie, and but we learned so much about him, why he was a great skater, because he'd been a great out player and all that stuff. So he was a great ad.
Toronto kid, and from the time he was 15 or so, terrible knee problems that ultimately ended his career and probably stopped him from becoming the goalie he could have been in total, because he was so athletic and so instinctive. There's a save, if you go back, that he makes in the Islanders in Game 7 that is just so off the charts, ridiculous. It was just athleticism. And he played the position at a time when the position was played athletically, before the equipment became and changed the position forever. But, he was actually in Toronto for a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And then he came back, but he came back again for a short period of time. But I would swear when I talk to people about this book and you go, okay, Salming and Sittler and McDonald and Tiger, and the next name is always Mike Palmateer. And I'm not sure who you would compare him to in Toronto sports history as an athlete who is looked upon so fondly. He was kind of, in a way, I guess the best comparison from a Leaf history would be in terms of pure popularity would be Wendell Clark.
Yeah.
And he was also, Johnny Bower was the guy who would, whenever he'd show up at the Gardens or at the new building, always get a standing ovation. Well, Mike Palmateer was in many ways the new Johnny Bower when he came through because of the way he played the game. Just fearless. Stick your face right in front of it and absolutely fearless. But he didn't get to play very long, and very shortly after that series in 78, which he won Game 7. There's no question in my mind. If Mike Palmateer doesn't stand on his head in Game 7, the Islanders win that series. And within a year and a half, he's gone. He's gone to Washington in a trade, and that was part of the whole breaking up of the team.
We're gonna dive into that breaking up of the squad here. But you mentioned Johnny Bower, and it is the holiday season.
Sing along, Gord.
Honky the Christmas Goose. So
Honky, honky,
the first year of the Fan, or first or second year of the Fan, so there'd be these interesting pairings around the holidays. I remember Todd Macklin had the line, he goes, it looked like a WWF wrestling team. You never knew which two, because I think it was one time Steve Paikin went in the studio with Leo Cahill or something. Like just, because you had all these people filling in, right? So Christmas Eve, McCowan wasn't doing primetime sports, so Ken Daniels and I did a show till 6 p.m. or 7, filled in just a Christmas Eve show, and we got Johnny Bower on, and he sang this over the phone while his wife Nancy played the organ. It was the best. It was the best. We weren't expecting it either. We kind of talked, and because Johnny's this nice, genuine guy.
It sounds like at this time of year, that's when radio became kind of like a podcast, right? More freeform and.
Our show was always freeform.
No, it was free. But when Ken Daniels' son passed away a number of years ago, and one thing I referenced, they said, man, oh man, I still I think about the happy memory like Johnny Bower and all that, kind of thing. And he goes, man, oh man, Ken goes, I wish I could do that a million times over. Like just that was a fun memory about that. I kind of was just throwing it.
I'm stuck on your wrestling analogy, and it was always, and it's so true. You'd be watching on TV, and you'd have the Fabulous Kangaroos tag team, and they'd be taking on Dominic DeNucci and then Joe Smith.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You knew there was no chance that Dominic DeNucci was going to emerge with a win, and Joe Smith was the guy who was going to get pummeled at the end, and the Fabulous Kangaroos were going to hang on to their belts. But how about that for a reference?
That's pretty good.
Thank you. And then neither one of them were Australian. Johnny Bower. One of the nicest people I think I've ever met. And one year he came out with his book, and one of the greatest honors, maybe the greatest honor of my sports media life, was he was doing a reading of his book at the Queen's Park. They do the thing up there with the books.
Yeah.
And they're going to do, and he asked me if I would sit down with him and ask him the question so he could do it. And I go, Johnny Bower.
That's neat.
Johnny Bower.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
what a treasure,
lovely man.
A treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was a big 1050 jam there, Johnny Bower.
We talked right over it the whole thing.
That's okay. That's so people can find it on YouTube. But there's another jam I always
including us talking.
When I think, if you want, I could put that on YouTube. When I think of like Maple Leaf songs from back in the day, anyways.
Clear the Track? Is that what you're going to play?
Clear the track, here comes Shaq. He knocks him down and he gives him a whack. He can score goals, he's found the night. Eddie, Shaq.
Like this is the best of the bunch, right? This is as good as it got, I'd say.
It was a hit on AM radio.
Yeah.
What's catchy AF? I dig it. Like it's Clear the Track, Here Comes Shaq.
Now this was at a time when songs like The Streak could be top 10 hits too.
Oh, this is like 10 years before that.
This would have been
this is when they're winning Stanley Cups.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
This is mid-60s.
Yeah, like novelty songs like Purple People Eater and stuff like that.
Well, because the book talks about later on when he comes back again, Eddie skating around being chased by the tough St. Louis Blues team was embarrassment for the Leaf organization that realized they had to get tougher. And Tiger Williams got called up after that. That was
No, they drafted him.
drafted.
And then they started bringing in Dave Dunn.
And all those guys.
And Kurt Walker.
And I say that with affection. I like Eddie. Eddie used to hold court at the Starbucks at Avenue Road in Glencairn, or Avenue Road in St. Germain, kitty corner from Safari. His loud voice there. And, we miss him.
He's an unusual player, too, because in NHL history, in that when he came back in the 70s with expansion, he was kind of like a goofball kind of player. But early in his career with the Leafs, like, he was a serious player and a very good, big, strong winger who could score goals.
Yeah.
This is Gord Stellick's wedding song. Did you know that?
The first dance, right?
This was it, yes.
All right, a couple more gifts for you guys. I have wireless speakers. So you each have one of these. These are Bluetooth wireless speakers for you to take home with you.
Where's the wire?
Well, that's the idea of wireless.
Gord and I grew up in an era where the speakers
Everything
we'd
had
get
wires.
were like
Appreciate
4
that.
feet high.
Oh, I know. And the bigger the the speaker, the better the sound.
Hoofers and tweeters.
Right, subwoofers, everything.
Whatever they were.
So, why did I give you those wireless speakers? Well, Moneris sent
you like
them over
us?
because I like you. I do. I like you both. That's why I think, Damien, you must have been over now at least 7 times. I should go check this out.
I have been here quite a bit.
Because you had a fifth appearance and then 2 with Gord here. So, and Gord's a couple behind you.
Do we get jackets like they give them on Saturday Night Live for 5?
I'm working
can we
on
get jackets.
it. I need a jacket sponsor. If you're,
I'd love
What
to.
a great.
That would be good.
What a great skit that was.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
The 5-person club, 5 visits club.
No,
Gord's the one guy. Gord and Brendan Shanahan are the few people who watch Saturday Night Live as much as I do, and still you're still watching, aren't you?
Dribs and drabs. Yeah.
Brendan Shanahan wrote the foreword for your book.
He did. Wasn't that nice of him?
Mimico's own Brendan Shanahan.
Mm-hmm.
He's garnered a real appreciation. The Borja thing. A lot of people would have, but Brendan being an ex-player in that, they really did everything right. They couldn't do enough. Like the alumni, Daryl talked about that, and Brendan's got a real appreciation about the alumni, but also in living in the present as well.
But also his own experience growing up in Mimico. And the way he saw that team broken up, which I know we're going to get to. And so every time I hear people like last spring, they're gonna get rid of Marner or Nylander or Matthews, and no, they're not, because he saw what happens when you just start breaking things up because you're unhappy because you lost again, and that's not going to happen.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so why did I give you that speaker? It's because
we're back to that
you
again.
can now listen to season 5 of Yes, We Are Open, which is an award-winning podcast by Moneris, hosted by FOTM El Grego. I will definitely be seeing El Grego tomorrow at TMLX 14 at Palma's Kitchen, and I hope to see Damien Cox make an appearance. I would put Damien Cox and Stephen Brunt on the microphones. I have 2 open mics for this
We had
recording.
coffee the other day. We have nothing left to talk about.
Well,
so
you haven't said anything on the record in a while. So if you show up, that would be amazing. But the podcast, Yes, We Are
really
Open.
putting the pressure on.
When Al went out east, he went to the Maritimes and Newfoundland, and he spoke to small business owners, and he collected their inspiring stories, and he shares them in season 5 of Yes, We Are Open. And while you're subscribing to podcasts, there's 2 more I'd like to tell you guys about. One of them is called the Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Whether you already work with a trusted financial advisor or currently manage your own investment plans, the Advantaged Investor provides the engaging wealth management information you value as you pursue your most important goals. So, you got some podcasts to subscribe to. I want to shout out Ridley Funeral Home. We did a new episode of Life's Undertaking yesterday, and Brad has sent over measuring tapes for you guys.
No.
Yeah. So you got a measuring tape from Ridley Funeral Home.
I've always wanted one of these with Gord's around, because then I can measure his ego.
So one thing about Harold Ballard, he went to a lot of he went to a lot of funerals, and you just would get drafted. And so he's load up the big car, and I go to like Usher's funeral. It meant a lot when he showed up, right? So he went, and I didn't like going to funerals all the time, but you just, hey, Gordy, we're going to go. So you loaded up, And then when he came back, he'd go, "Do you see the Undertaker's eyeing me?" He goes, "He's going to be a big one."
Well, and one of my favorite stories that I've tried to fit in a couple of books and I've failed every time is do you know who buried
Jeff Merrick?
Jeff Merrick physically buried.
He's at
Harold
Park Lawn
Ballard.
Cemetery.
Yeah.
I've biked over and seen it's only on the ground though. It's not one of those like stones. It's like
It's not a big deal.
no, it's just you
Yeah.
on the
It's
ground.
not as big a deal, say, as Steve Stavros.
Oh my gosh!
Steve Stavros.
If people haven't seen it, if you're driving north on Mount Pleasant, look to your left before you hit
You
St.
would have
Clair.
thought he won like 12 Stanley Cups and
Well, you know who's got a big one in Park Lawn is
That's his.
Melnick. Eugene Melnick
Does he?
is a massive in
haven't seen that.
because I do the biking through Park
is
Lawn.
he really?
It's a big one, yeah.
I like Merrick said somebody on their tombstone has, "I told you I wasn't feeling well." I love that. You talk about someone with a sense of humor.
That's fantastic. So, one last thing on the sponsor front, which is recyclemyelectronics.ca. That's where you go if you have old cables, old devices, old electronics you need to throw out. Don't put it in the garbage. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca and find a place near you where you could drop it off and have it properly recycled so the chemicals don't end up in our landfill.
That's a better idea than what I do. I just drop them on Gord's front lawn.
And then Gord goes to recyclemyelectronics.ca. Okay. Revival, the chaotic, colorful journey of the 1977-78 Toronto Maple Leafs. They win that first round convincingly against the Kings. Then there's this very exciting 7-game series against the Islanders just before they bang off, I think, 4 in a row shortly thereafter. But then we're kind of trounced by Montreal. So my question for you guys is, and you do cover it nicely in the book, but Imlach, I'm going to read from your book now. Okay, so Imlach listed Sittler, Lanny McDonald, Ian Turnbull, Borje Salming, and goalie Mike Palmateer as the keys to the team's future. Meanwhile, as I learned in your book, Lanny was gone 6 months later because of this Imlach feud with Sittler, who had a no trade clause. Palmateer was traded 6 months after Lanny. Turnbull had scored in 3 straight playoff games in his brilliant spring of 1978, and it would be another 45 years, this is a fun fact, before another Leaf defenseman, Morgan Riley, would match that postseason feat. But that didn't matter to Imlach. He sent Turnbull to Los Angeles a year after Palmateer had been dealt to Washington, and then finally, Darryl Sittler was dealt in January 1982. So that's 2.5 years that all those guys were gone. What the heck happened?
Well, the simple.
Yeah, Gord.
Yeah. Well, I was working in the office back
So
then.
you were part of this.
I was working
You were
part-time.
part of this decision making.
And what happened the second year, 78, 79, the fun year didn't exist anymore. Harold wasn't happy with the lack of improvement on the team. He was expecting bigger things. And King Clancy, who's always viewed as the court jester, actually had a big role in Harold's ear. And he convinced him that Punch Imlach, because he'd been Punch Imlach's right-hand man through the 4 Stanley Cups. When Punch went to Buffalo, some people thought King would go, but he stayed. He became Ballard's right-hand man. So he convinced him to bring Punch Imlach back. So meanwhile, by the way, he did not trade Ian Turnbull. Jerry McNamara did. Ian Turnbull is the one who conned Punch Imlach. He's a different dude. So he did his contract by himself. He had a restaurant across from the Gardens called Grapes, and he would come in. Imlach told me the story. He goes, and Turnbull would come in and do the. I go, this is great. I like hanging around, and we're gonna. And then he just disappeared. And after you signed the contract, and Punch goes, he conned me. So that Ian Turnbull always being the contrarian, but. I got to tell you, so Punch came in and was sold. It was a country club, he said, and he sold Ballard on that. And he said that about he was going to get rid of them all because that's what Clancy had sold Ballard on. They had to do, and I got to tell you, Punch Imlach the second time around was a disaster. Punch Imlach treated Gord Stellick extremely well. So when I say I'm torn, I'm not really torn. I'm spelling it out there. The man was wonderful to me. And but he'd lost his A game, and he came in. And to Damien's point earlier, when everyone talks about, we're going to blow it up. Yeah, that's an example. You blow it up. You know how long it takes to get put back together. decades.
Yeah, and I think the motivation is still hard to figure out in a way. Like there was a personal feud with Sittler for sure, which had to do with Showdown and all that stuff.
And
right?
Eagleson.
So that was a big part of it. But all that said, like there's nothing wrong with trading a player. The Islanders had to trade a veteran player like Dave Lewis, but they made a great trade.
Right.
They traded all these guys, McDonald, Palmetier, Turnbull, Sittler, and none of them did they get. I mean, they got Wilf Paymont back for Lanny, who was a very good NHL player, but he wasn't Lanny McDonald.
Not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and so if you're going to trade guys, then there was no salary cap. You could have done anything.
Right.
And instead they just made one bad trade and another, because you're making trades out of the wrong motivations, and you're making trades. What'd they get for Turnbull?
John Gibson.
Yeah.
There's no pro scouting back then.
Right.
As well. So Punch is doing this basically on his own. Right. Whatever. And at that point he's in his mid 60s. He's not following it as much, and he's got
health problems.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, yeah, he died relatively young. He had number of heart attacks and bypass surgery.
And some organizations were modernizing, and the Leafs, despite the modernization that Roger Nielsen brought to the organization, weren't. Teams were starting to beef up. Teams were starting to use or beef up their scouting departments. And the merger was coming, and so there was going to be even more. It was more complicated. It was becoming more complicated, and Europeans were on the verge of coming to the NHL. There were more Americans who could play. You needed to do more, and the Leafs at that time weren't in a position or chose not to do those things.
There were 5 or 6 organizations back then in say 18-team NHL or whatever number it was. They were just better.
Yeah.
So you started the year that those teams were better. They were better run. And nowadays, I think every organization has the staff and is, relatively speaking, well run.
And that's Gord was, when I started covering the NHL in the late 80s, there were still teams that were a joke, that were run by guys just off the cuff and with but now there aren't. I mean, they're all well organized. They all have money. They all, I guess the exception would be whatever that organization they have in Phoenix is, or Arizona. But even they're doing pretty well these days. I mean, there just aren't those kind of organizations. But in the 70s, there was a lot of goofy stuff that went on, a lot of in-the-drawer agreements that weren't part of, the union wasn't as strong.
And most of the owners like getting headlines.
Right.
It was get your name in the paper. Now keep your name out of the paper. Yeah. I mean, it's just a cloak of where is Ross Atkins? Where was Kyle Dubas? Where are all these guys? They can just make appearances when they want. You used to have to shoot the breeze every day.
Yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about Michael Andlauer coming in and taking over Ottawa is it's nice to hear an owner talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
What other owner in the NHL talks these days? They used to all talk today, and in the 70s, I mean, it was kind of the Wild West.
Wow. So I'm kind of glad I don't remember this in real time, these 77, 78 Leafs, because it seemed like you had that moment of hope, and you had a good core, and then you're excited for the future, and then very, very quickly it's all blowing up.
Yep. Sad.
That's
really
a lunch bag. That's a lunch bag letdown.
Kind of like, and we draw this parallel in the book, is kind of like how fans of the Montreal Expos feel about the strike year, when they were the best team in baseball and maybe had a chance to win the World Series, and you'll never know. And the fact is, we'll never know with the Leafs.
Saying the word magical, I know it sounds like a corny word, but if you're a diehard fan, that's how you felt that season in that playoff. And that's how, same with the Expos, because I was an Expo fan as well.
Yeah, but but the Leafs, you thought it was the beginning.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, not the Cup necessarily this year, but this is, we're there. We're up there with Boston, Philadelphia, Montreal. We're there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're swept by the Habs, right? In the final.
Yep.
Yeah.
Three of the games went to overtime?
I think 3 went to overtime, or 2 did anyway. And they were the best team in the league. So that's something Harold didn't say. The best team by a country mile in the league. So there was no shame.
Maybe the greatest dynasty in NHL history.
Yeah, you'd have to put them up there, maybe as great a team as there ever was.
Yeah, the Chicago Bulls of the NHL there, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to do a little mop up here. I do urge everybody,
Do we
who
spill
has
something?
the Revival is the book to buy for the hockey fan in your life this holiday season. And let me see it. So it's hardcover. You can't get that in a stocking, but it's too good for a stocking stuffer. It's just a gift unto itself. So pick up Revival at Gord's house. No. Reach out if you want an autographed copy. You can find it wherever you get your books. Very good. I loved going back because I missed 77, 78, and I found it interesting. A lot of those details I didn't know. But okay, some questions did come in from FOTMs.
Are they going to be nice ones or mean ones?
Yeah, I had many mean ones, and I decided I'd only read the one mean one, and we'll just put it all into that one mean email. Everything else here is loving for you guys. Mike Rogotsky wrote in, Stellick and Cox are great.
Yes.
Both of you, he says. Okay. Can you ask them who was their favorite Leafs coach to deal with?
Well, by default, because when the fan launched, like Pat Burns, like the timing of it all doesn't mean he was a better guy than the others, but he liked the media, liked the limelight, liked us, so we could. I just remember once we were trying to talk about. I think Glenn Anderson was going to get 1,000 career points, so we had Norm Ullman on about because he got it as a Leaf, and Norm's pretty low key, and it wasn't a big and it wasn't a big deal. So he Burns on, he goes, "I'm listening to your show. You guys are really driving on the wall there about this 1,000, So I mean, Pat Quinn wasn't as media friendly. I really did like Pat Quinn though. But I guess for me, I don't know, Damien, just at the time of it all, Pat Burns was the guy. And, he was a guy that, they listened back then. That's where they got their sports from. Like we had Todd Gill call in once as to try to win free Leaf tickets. We're giving out Leaf tickets on the playoff game, and Todd Gill's driving home, and he was the fourth caller out of 10, trying to get 2 tickets.
That's amazing.
Say Burnsy?
I had some special times with Pat, that's for sure. In terms of doing the job, he could be tough on you though. Like he could be really tough on you. The guy who I really enjoyed dealing with when he was coach from a media point of view,
Murph.
Paul Maurice.
Oh, Paul Maurice. Okay.
Paul Maurice was wonderful to deal with, and still is wonderful to deal with. Murph was great, but Murph was
just there for a bit.
He was so under the gun too. Like,
I know.
Like he barely had a chance. He had he didn't have the support. Paul Maurice was really great to deal with,
and that's why he was great in media. Like in between, he was great at TSN before he took Winnipeg in here. So
how about the worst?
The worst?
Know the worst?
Yeah, who are the worst? Yeah.
Well, Doug Carpenter would be right up there, but for me, it was Pat Quinn. I did not get along with Pat Quinn at all.
Yeah, I see. Again, I knew Pat, but he wouldn't do much on media and that, and that. So he would be. I don't know. I'm trying to think the worst. I just think Ron Wilson was terrible.
Oh yeah,
like that was ridiculous. The guy comes.
It really.
The guy comes as the coach of the San Jose Sharks. He gets asked a question in Calgary by Jermaine Franklin about, something about they changed captains. And he goes, that's the goddamn Canadian media, the bloody Canadian media. And then we hire him in Toronto 2 years later.
And he shows up with he's got a passport because he's got dual citizenship. Look, I'm a Canadian. Not a lot of time for us.
See, I remember in '77, he was part of the team. He got sent down to Dallas once, and I remember him and Rocky Saginaw, and they waited outside to get their airplane tickets. And I remember him saying, well, at least I can play golf in Dallas.
That's one of the amazing things on that Dallas team. They had, I think it was the next year, they had Ron Wilson, Randy Carlisle got sent down, Joel Quenneville, wasn't there one more?
Bruce Boudreau.
And
Daryl Sutter.
And they all became.
And Daryl Sutter.
And Daryl Sutter.
Because Chicago was part of the team. Yeah.
Oh, right. So, and they all became NHL head coaches.
Wow. Hey Ref is actually watching live at live.torontomike.com.
Where's the camera?
There actually, so it's sort of a weird angle, but yeah, it's there. Okay.
I would have sat up straight.
No,
sitting with my big gut hanging out here. Sorry, Hey Ref.
Don't worry. Hey Ref, he referees games, and he wants to ask.
Evidently, they yell at him a lot.
Gord Stellick. The question for Gord is: how long has it been since you were behind a GTHL bench?
Oh. Phenomenal memories, man. And I appreciate the men and women that ref those games. I really
Did you yell at the referees?
No, I really didn't. I was vocal about the team and that, I just, in a good way, I really got into the games quite a bit. So to answer the question, let's see, I think, when COVID hit was sort of my last year that I was doing that. So what was that, 2020? And it wasn't as much fun because the kids were 16. So it used to be that, and we were at a tournament in Buffalo. So when the kids were 8 or 9 or 10, like I coached at North Toronto, really enjoyed it, special time. And then when they're 16, just a month before COVID, we're in Buffalo and it's pricey. And we're playing Toronto teams that are in Buffalo. And then I get called by security to try to identify which of our kids were peeing in a garbage can. You know what? We've kind of jumped the shark here. What happened to these nice team lunches, that team meals that we used to have, whatever? I think we jumped the shark there.
Amazing. Now, I'm curious if either of you has had any contact with Bob McCowan since his health challenges.
I have.
Okay.
Just by text, back and forth a little bit. And Bob's hit a real tough time in his life. And, we're all hoping for him. He's in a real tough spot.
John Shannon's being a really good friend.
Yeah, he
really is.
Yeah.
Really is.
So, I just exchanged a couple of things just to sort of wish him well and tell him I was thinking about him. And geez, a lot of years working with Bob, and to see him in that situation's tough.
Yeah, that was terrible news, and I hope he fully recovers. Okay, so I've saved a series of questions from a gentleman named Manfred. Manfred has a band called Elephants and Stars. And Manfred, I hope I see you tomorrow at TMLX 14, because I know you were at the last event we had at Palma's Kitchen. But okay, Manfred writes in, as someone who still defends the Kordic for Courtnall trade, I have the following questions. So the first question is for Gord Stellick. How did Gord feel about it at the time versus now in retrospect? So yeah, revisit how you felt at the time about the Courtnall trade, and then
I can answer that.
How do you feel now?
You know what? No, I'm gonna, because Gord gets beat up about this, and the only thing I will say before you carry on and answer his question is, Gord was trying to help his coach, which is what a general manager should, to some degree, do. He was trying to help his coach. Go ahead.
So at the Chisholm Bonspiel this past weekend, I was about to, the first rock was being thrown, and one of the guys that cleans the ice said to me, I think he's a little different, but anyway, I've never talked to him before. He goes, did you trade Tom Curvers for a first overall pick? And I kind of go, what the F? I said, no. I quickly put it on Floyd Smith. But anyway, and it wasn't a first overall pick. So the point that Damien said, I knew I inherited John Brophy as head coach. And you know what? Brof was a wonderful guy. Wonderful guy. Like, really was. Like just shouldn't have been coaching the NHL. And people could argue I shouldn't be a general manager in the NHL. Whatever. But so he was my coach. And I put out a lot of fires in general, with certain players about things. But Russ Courtnall was a guy that got under Brof's skin. He's just this good-looking guy, not a physical guy, chirpy. So there were a couple things, and we get off to a solid start. And one, he wanted our team to be more physical. We had 2 bad games against the Boston Bruins and the LA Kings that were both, and Brof was going nuts. And also in Courtnall's case, I remember we're in Chicago, like we got off this 8-3-1 start in the first 12 games. Unfortunately, there were 68 more games in the season. But he wasn't in the lineup, and he just came out with and I realized then, like, I was crestfallen. I said, Rush, just mind your P's and Q's, whatever. I'll figure something out if this isn't going to happen. He played Danny Daou ahead of him. So they loved John Kordic. Our pro scouting was on the weaker side, to say the least. So Brof was a member of the Montreal Canadian organization in 1986. He was coaching in Nova Scotia, where John Kordic was a big part. His toughness and a part of them winning the Stanley Cup.
And he was tough.
Oh, tough. So he was the number 1 heavyweight. Okay. So it came down to that about making the trade. And anyway, it couldn't. And one thing.
Did you have any other offers? Did you have any?
No. There's nobody else that said, geez, I offered, Damien Cox. So that's the thing. Russ was a healthy scratch for, say, 4 of the first 12 games. And one thing punched him, like, did he traded Lanny McDonald to Colorado? There was a reason. You never saw Lanny McDonald. I wasn't thinking that way. You saw Russ every Saturday scoring twice for Montreal.
Right.
It seemed. But anyway, so the trade's made. And John Kordic did the job for a while, but we didn't, weren't aware of.
He also punched Alan Bester.
Well, we weren't aware of the troubles he had endured since 1986. And when Cam Neely got into the Hockey Hall of Fame, so this is when you're fast forwarding. So I used to be the kind of the MC for all those things. So you're chatting before the fan forum upstairs behind, and we had like a 10-minute conversation about John Kordic, how good, because he played with him at Portland, and how great a player he was. He was an all-star defenseman in Portland. And here's Cam Neely, and then Cam Neely said he stayed a week at Kordic's house in Edmonton because they had a power skating person there. Audrey Bakel was her name in Edmonton. So the Portland guys obviously put him there, and he goes, he was terrified of his old man.
Yeah, it was a messed up.
It's a messed up place. So
and he got in. I don't know by the time you got him whether he had a drug problem already by that point.
Oh, he already did. Yeah.
And probably today you would know more about that kind of thing, but then you would not have.
So I what I feel bad about was he was a funny guy. There was a lot to John Kordic.
There really was.
And there was a lot to John Brophy.
Was messed up.
There was just, so it's not like it's amazing that I was walking on Yonge Street last year, beautiful July day, and I'm walking with someone, all of a sudden a car comes by, and the guy goes, "Cardinal for Kordic," and the guy goes, "What? Are you kidding me?" 30 plus years later, like there's been all these other trades that have happened, but I think on a positive side for me, it shows I've stayed relevant and have some notoriety on the media side, and I don't make fun of it or make light of it because, hey, it's a bad trade. Of course it's a bad trade, as it played out. Okay, I mean, I can start talking 2 first-round picks for Ken Greggett, Brad Marsh on the waiver draft, Lou Franchisetti for a 5th, Robert Amage for a 2nd. Anyway, leave all that stuff alone. And then because there's the human side of it, and it's a tragic ending for a guy that really, there were a lot of positives at one point.
Well, you touched on this, but this question is for both of you because there's 3 parts to this question. Remember, the second part was Manfred wants to know, what was John Kordic like to deal with personally? But you did touch on it, but maybe elaborate a little more. Like, what kind of a human being was he when you dealt with him?
Yeah, I dealt with him a lot from a media point of view and spent a lot of time talking to him on the phone and stuff like that. He was a guy who had really nice qualities, but really negative qualities. Obviously, he was dealing with a drug issue eventually. All the guys who are enforcers, they all talk a big game, but it's an awful job to have to do, particularly back then when every night you're going to have to fight some big, nasty guy. And also, he wasn't a great team guy, and so he would say stuff for a reporter. It was helpful, but he'd talk about his teammates and he'd say things about his teammates. And the Leafs at that time were a messed up organization in terms of relationships with some of their players and that. So he could be, he needed a father figure. He needed a dad.
Yeah.
He needed someone what he needed was for the team to say, hang on, you're not playing anymore. We're going to send you to rehab and we're going to help you get your life together, even if you never play hockey again. Right. But at that time, and I would argue still today, all they want is these guys to come in, behave like goons, and then when they can't fight anymore, they just get rid of them.
They had talked about, now he was only here for like a year and a half. Yeah. And again, we're talking the worst time of his life. Okay. But for example, to Damien's point, then I was gone by the time he got sent down to the Newmarket Saints briefly. So he played on a Friday there and they had a road trip on a Saturday. So apparently in those 2 days, he fell asleep at the meeting and snored loudly. He almost got a fight with a teammate on the bench.
He wanted to kind of be the class clown.
And then at the end, when the bus ride home, he cheered loudly when someone said the Leafs had lost. They got the NHL. He was vying for attention, vying for love, vying for a lot of things. And by the time he got here, he was hanging out in all the wrong places. And that's just...
what a tragic tale. Yeah. It's so sad. Okay, final question here from Manfred.
It's not about John Kordic, is it?
Yeah, well, it's a trilogy. Remember, he
is
opened
there a
by
washroom
saying,
break coming up, by the way?
We're going to wrap after this question.
Okay.
I'll play you out
like
here.
I'm old.
No, we're done in like 5 minutes. Does Damien remember getting a random phone call from a young person expressing concerns for John Kordic near the end of his Leafs tenure? Do you have any memory of this, Damien Cox?
I don't have a memory of it. But I'm not that it might have happened, but I don't.
So would people just randomly call the Star? They just pick up and they'd be like,
and at that time, like I say, I'd be talking to John Kordic late at night, and when he was so. It's possible that somebody called me, but I don't remember it.
Well, I think that somebody must have been Manfred. Well, otherwise, he wouldn't know about that. So it sounds like you got a call from Manfred at the end of John Kordic's time as a Maple Leaf.
He's not in the book, by the way.
Is this the bathroom break point of our program?
You can totally go right now, because I'm just going to read a little.
I'll probably hit my head if I don't.
Don't hit your head. You're one of the first people to bang that ceiling really hard
I
here.
a huge cut in my head. Like,
It was
still hasn't
ceiling, huh?
healed, and that was years ago.
Don't forget to sign these books before we go.
Open head wound.
So
Harry.
Damien's going to go pee. Yes, that's right. Revival is the name of the new book by Gord Stellick and Damien Cox. Gentlemen, I actually love it when you are, I'm not trying to act surprised here, but I love it when you guys come on together, and I hope we can do this again sometime. This was great.
Well, it sounds good. Always been good. Yeah.
I got to get out of here so Damien
Always
doesn't wear
but
pants.
good.
Okay. It was real good. That was real good. Thanks.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,387th show. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm at Toronto Mike. Damien's on Twitter as Damo Spin. And Gord, you're at Gord Stellick.
Yeah.
Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. That's Palma Pasta. That's Raymond James Canada. That's Moneris. That's Recycle My Electronics. And Ridley Funeral Home. See you all tomorrow live from Palma's Kitchen. It's TMLX 14. You should join us.
Well, you've been under my skin for more than 8 years. It's been 8 years of laughter and 8 years of tears. And I don't know what the future can hold or will do for me and you. But I'm a much better man for having known you. Oh, you know that's true, because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rosy and green. Well, I've been told that there's a sucker born every day, but I wonder who